Chapter 1 of Moonfleet. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Graham Redman. Moonfleet by J. Mead Faulkner. We thought there was no more behind, but such a day tomorrow as today, and to be a boy eternal. Shakespeare. To all Mahoons of Fleet and Moonfleet, in agro Dorsis Strensi, living or dead. Says the captain to the crew, "We have slipped the revenue. I can see the cliffs of Dover on the lee. Tip the signal to the Swan, and anchor broadside on, and out with the kegs of eau-de-vie." Says the captain, "Out with the kegs of eau-de-vie." Says the lander to his men, "Get your grummets on the pin, there's a blue light burning out at sea. The windward anchors creep, and the gaugers fast asleep, and the kegs are bobbing, 1, 2, 3. Says the lander, "The kegs are bobbing, 1, 2, 3. But the bold preventive man primes the powder in his pan, and cries to the posse, "Follow me. We will take this smuggling gang, and those that fight shall hang dingle-dangle from the execution tree." Says the gauger, "Dingle-dangle with the weary moon to see." Chapter 1 In Moonfleet Village. So sleeps the pride of former days. Moore. The village of Moonfleet lies half a mile from the sea on the right or west bank of the Fleet stream. This rivulet, which is so narrow as it passes the houses that I have known a good jumper clear it without a pole, broadens out into salt marshes below the village, and loses itself at last in a lake of brackish water. The lake is good for nothing except seafowl, herons, and oysters, and forms such a place as they call in the Indies a lagoon, being shut off from the open channel by a monstrous great beach or dyke of pebbles, of which I shall speak more hereafter. When I was a child I thought that this place was called Moonfleet because on a still night, whether in summer or in winter frosts, the moon shone very brightly on the lagoon, but learned afterwards that 'twas but short for Mahoonfleet, from the Mahoons, a great family who were once lords of all these parts. My name is John Trenchard, and I was 15 years of age when this story begins. My father and mother had both been dead for years, and I boarded with my aunt, Miss Arnold, who was kind to me in her own fashion, but too strict and precise ever to make me love her. I shall first speak of one evening in the fall of the year 1757. It must have been late in October, though I have forgotten the exact date, and I sat in the little front parlour reading after tea. My aunt had few books. A Bible, a Common Prayer, and some volumes of sermons are all that I can recollect now, but the Reverend Mr. Glennie, who taught us village children, had lent me a story-book, full of interest and adventure, called the Arabian Nights' Entertainment. At last the light began to fail, and I was nothing loath to leave off reading for several reasons. As first, the parlour was a chilly room, with horsehair chairs and sofa, and only a coloured paper screen in the grate, for my aunt did not allow a fire till the 1st of November. Second, there was a rank smell of molten tallow in the house, for my aunt was dipping winter candles on frames in the back kitchen. Third, I had reached a part in the Arabian Nights which tightened my breath and made me wish to leave off reading for very anxiousness of expectation. It was that point in the story of the wonderful lamp, where the false uncle lets fall a stone that seals the mouth of the underground chamber, and immures the boy Aladdin in the darkness, because he would not give up the lamp till he stood safe on the surface again. This scene reminded me of one of those dreadful nightmares, where we dream we are shut in a little room, the walls of which are closing in upon us, and so impressed me that the memory of it served as a warning in an adventure that befell me later on. So I gave up reading, and stepped out into the street. It was a poor street at best, though once, no doubt, it had been finer. Now, there were not 200 souls in Moonfleet, and yet the houses that held them straggled sadly over half a mile, lying at intervals along either side of the road. Nothing was ever made new in the village. If a house wanted repair badly, it was pulled down, and so there were toothless gaps in the street, and overrun gardens with broken-down walls, and many of the houses that yet stood looked as though they could stand but little longer. The sun had set. Indeed, it was already so dusk that the lower or sea end of the street was lost from sight. There was a little fog or smoke wreath in the air, with an odour of burning weeds, and that first frosty feeling of the autumn that makes us think of glowing fires and the comfort of long winter evenings to come. All was very still, but I could hear the tapping of a hammer farther down the street, and walked to see what was doing, for we had no trades in Moonfleet save that of fishing. It was Ratsey, the sexton, at work in a shed which opened on the street, lettering a tombstone with a mallet and graver. He had been mason before he became fisherman, and was handy with his tools, so that if any one wanted a headstone set up in the churchyard, he went to Ratsey to get it done. I leant over the half-door, and watched him a minute, chipping away with the graver in a bad light from a lantern. Then he looked up, and seeing me, said, "Here, John, if you have nothing to do, come in and hold the lantern for me. 'Tis but a half-hour's job to get all finished." Ratsey was always kind to me, and had lent me a chisel many a time to make boats, so I stepped in and held the lantern, watching him chink out the bits of Portland stone with a graver, and blinking the while when they came too near my eyes. The inscription stood complete, but he was putting the finishing touches to a little sea-piece carved at the top of the stone, which showed a schooner boarding a cutter. I thought it fine work at the time, but know now that it was rough enough. Indeed, you may see it for yourself in Moonfleet churchyard to this day, and read the inscription too, though it is yellow with lichen, and not so plain as it was that night. This is how it runs: "Sacred to the memory of David Block, aged 15, who was killed by a shot fired from the Elector schooner, 21 June 1757. Of life bereft, by fell design, I mingle with my fellow clay. On God's protection I recline, to save me in the judgment day. There too must you, cruel man, appear, repent ere it be all too late, or else a dreadful sentence fear, for God will sure revenge my fate." The Reverend Mr. Glennie wrote the verses, and I knew them by heart, for he had given me a copy. Indeed, the whole village had rung with the tale of David's death, and it was yet in every mouth. He was only child to Elzevir Block, who kept the Why Not Inn at the bottom of the village, and was with the contrabandiers when their ketch was boarded that June night by the government schooner. People said that it was Magistrate Maskew of Moonfleet Manor who had put the revenue men on the track, and anyway he was on board the Elector as she overhauled the ketch. There was some show of fighting when the vessels first came alongside of one another, and Maskew drew a pistol and fired it off in young David's face, with only the two